Welcome everybody. Today we're going to be talking about angle pair relationships again. So our first word of the day is vertical angles. So they are two angles formed by opposite rays. They create a perfect X. So notice in the picture to the right, you have two lines that have crossed each other and made a perfect X. So the angles across from each other, so this angle and this angle, are vertical angles. So angle 3 and angle 4 are vertical angles. Also, angle 1 and angle 2 are directly across from each other, so those are vertical angles with each other. So vertical angles form a perfect X, and they're the ones across from each other. The next word we have is a linear pair. So those are two adjacent angles. So remember, they share a side and a vertex, whose non-common side form a straight line. So we know straight line, that's going to be like 180 degrees. So if we look at this picture, this line is a straight line, and that's the side they don't like share in the middle. So those are a linear pair. So it's two angles, so like angle 5 and angle 6, they connect to make a straight line. So linear pairs are always supplementary. So angle 5 and angle 6 are a linear pair. So the question asks, use the figure to answer the following questions. So do any of the numbered angles form a linear pair? So when I look at this, I see a couple of straight lines. So right here, I see a straight line. So the two angles, so pair, it has to be two angles. So I didn't mention that earlier. So two angles would be angle 1 and angle 2 sit on that straight line, and they share a side. So angle 1 and angle 2. Do we see any others? So the yellow line also has 5, 4, and 3 on it, but that's not two angles. Ooh, but I see another straight line. So right here is also a straight line, and two angles sitting on that are 1 and 5. So 1 and 5 are also linear pair. Next, we've got vertical angles. So that's when we create the perfect X. So notice the green line and the yellow line, they do create an X. So the angles across from each other. So angle 5 is directly across the X from angle 2. So angle 5 and angle 2 would be vertical angles. Angle 1 is across from like 3 and 4, so they're not a vertical angles. So I think it's just 2 and 5 for this picture. Oh, adjacent. So adjacent looks like we've got a lot of angles. So we're just going to list a couple of them. So these are angles that share a vertex and a side. So like angle 4 and angle 5, they share a side and a vertex. Angle 4 and angle 3, they share the side and a vertex. So all these angles that are touching, so like angle 3 and angle 2, those are adjacent. Angle 2 and angle 1. Angle 1 and angle 5. This little symbol that I do, that means and. So anytime I draw that, that stands for and. So all these angles that just like shared a side and a vertex, they're all going to be adjacent angles. So the next one says a linear pair relationship. So we know those linear pairs form a straight line, and there's two angles. So if two angles are a linear pair, then I mentioned this earlier, they are supplementary, because we know straight lines are 180 degrees and supplementary angles are 180 degrees. So they equal 180. So off to the side, it says if angle 1 and angle 2 are a linear pair, then measure of angle 1 plus measure of angle 2 equals 180 degrees. So say if this was like 150 degrees, this would have to be 30 for them to add up to be 180. In linear pair, they do have to share, like they have to form the straight line and be adjacent. So I know supplementary doesn't always have to be touching, but to be a linear pair, they do have to be touching and make that straight line. Then a vertical angle theorem, if two angles are vertical, then they are congruent. So a reminder, congruent, we use that equal sign with a squiggly mark. And congruent means they're the same shape, the same size. So they are the same. So two lines make an X, so the ones across from each other are vertical, so they are congruent. So angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. So angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. You might also notice there's another pair of vertical angles. So angle 4 is across from 2, So angle 4 is also congruent to angle 2 because they're vertical angles. Remember, to show that angles are congruent, you can use those little arc marks. So one arc with my blue ones, those meant that those are congruent, and my 2 arcs in red meant that those are congruent. All right, find the measure of the numbered angles. All right, there's a lot going on in this picture. So I usually look at the picture first before I look at the question, and I label everything that I can. So notice 83 degrees is right across from angle 2, and those are vertical, so I know that they have to be equal. So those two congruent. So I know measure of angle 2 is 83 degrees. Same with 49. 49 is a vertical angle with 4, so I know angle 4 has to be 49 degrees. Okay, 1 and 3 are vertical to each other, so we know where they're going to be the same. Something you might notice is there is a straight line cutting through the middle, so we know straight lines equal 180 degrees. So I know that that green line contains all 3 of these, so all together they have to equal 180. So if we do 180 minus the 49 minus the 83, that should tell us what our missing angle is. So when I subtract those, I get 48. So I know this missing angle on that line is 48 degrees. And if that's 48, the one across from it has to be 48. So both of those are going to be 48 degrees. All right, flip the page. So this one says, identify the relationship of the two angles, find the value of x. Okay, so looking at problem 2, they've given us 2 angles across from each other on an x. So I know that those have got to be vertical angles. And vertical angles we know are congruent. So we can set those two equal to each other. So we can do 2x plus 40 equals 110, and then solve that for x. So to solve, we could subtract 40 on both sides. So 2x equals 70, divide by 2. So x equals 35. And that's all they've asked for, so we finished it. The next one, 3, we've got a perfect x, but the angles aren't across from each other, but they are sitting on this straight line. So I know if they are on a straight line, that means that they are a linear pair, which means they equal 180. So we're going to add these together. So 3x plus 8 plus x equals 180. I'm going to put the 1 in front of the x. So when I solve, I have x's on the same side, so I can combine like terms. So add them together, and then rewrite what's left, and then solve like normal. So minus 8, 4x equals 172, divide by 4, and we get x equals 43. So those pictures, it was very obvious whether they're vertical angles or linear pairs, whether they were across from each other or sitting on the straight line together. And the next pictures, you get to pick which method you want to use. So do you want to set them equal? Do you want to do 180? What makes the most sense? So the first one, we're solving for x and y. So when I look for x, the only place I see an x is right here. So there's no other x's. So I always choose vertical angles if I can. So this angle is right across from this angle, and that works out perfectly because there's no y across from it. So I'm going to choose vertical angles for x, and I know those are going to be congruent. So I'm going to do 3x plus 17 equals 113, and then solve. So we've got minus 17, 3x equals 96, divide by 3, so x equals 32. For y, you have a couple of options. So you could do vertical angles because the y's are across from each other, or you could do linear pair because it's sitting on a straight line with the 113. So kind of up to you. I'm going to choose the linear pair. So here's that straight line. So I know that these two angles together have to equal the 180. So I'm going to do linear pair. But you also could have done vertical angles. So we are going to do 3y minus 20 plus 113 equals 180. So my like terms I can combine are the 20 and the 113. So we would do 113 minus 20. And I actually solved this a different way when I did it by myself. So I've got to think about the mental math really quick. So 113 minus 20. So 93. So plus 93 equals 180. And then we can subtract the 93. So 3y equals 87. Divide by 3. So y equals 29. And you would have gotten the same answer if you'd solved it a different way. The final one we're going to look at, we've got solve for x and y again. So x is vertically angled with a y, and I don't want to do that. So I know that these make a straight line. So I'm going to pair the 48 with the x. So I'm going to do linear pair. So that equals 180. So I'm going to do 6x minus 18 plus 48 equals 180. So we're going to combine like terms. So 6x plus 30 equals 180. So if we subtract 30, we get 150. And if we divide by 6, x equals 25. Then for y, we've got some options. Ooh, okay. This 3y is right across from this 48. So that's a really nice vertical angle. So we can make them congruent. So we could do 3y equals 48. Divide by 3. So y equals 16. That was a nice one. So really for those last two problems we did, you have a lot of options. You could do vertical or linear pair, whatever makes the most sense to you. You just kind of got to try it and see what works. So good luck. I hope it goes well, and see you next time.